Yeah, as far as my experience prior to real estate, I started out in oil and gas, actually local to where we're sitting right now in Washington County. And the industry gave me the opportunity to, travel the tri-state area between here, West Virginia and Ohio, and, work on, several projects, involving, land acquisition and development. For the purpose of oil and gas, all of which ends up being directly real estate related, although it's for a different subset within the industry. A lot of people, they disconnect oil and gas and real estate, but they're technically one and the same because oil and gas is an interest in real estate. It's beneath the surface, but you still technically own it when you buy real estate, and you sell it the same way you do real estate. So it's got a lot of translatable, transferable skills. And, very early in my career working in oil and gas, I saw a lot of opportunities to, grow outside of, strictly oil and gas activity, by getting into real estate. And so, a light switch went off, at some point, in my early years, to, go after the real estate license, which I did. And then I parlayed that, real estate license into some outside projects, working with investors, utilizing my real estate license to, buy and sell, large assets, mainly farms, farms with mineral rights, farms with big houses. So yeah, things that I learned, working in oil and gas that, translate directly into real estate. At its most basic level, I would say, just learning how to deal with people. I grew up, as a city slicker, in the South Hills here in Pittsburgh, and a lot of the people I'm working with were, throughout different, rural areas surrounding the greater Pittsburgh area. And there's a little bit of a disconnect, when you're going to, somebody's farm at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, that, is a family-owned farm that's been passed down for generations. They're milking cows every day, and they work, 4 a.m., they're up milking cows, 4 p.m., they're milking cows, and they're working nonstop. And, you come in to that environment, without, the proper background and ability to connect with the people, and you're not going to get even to the front door, before you're, being directed back the other way, in either a more or less aggressive fashion, depending. And, yes, it does involve sometimes the stereotype of, getting, the guy coming out, on his front porch with a shotgun, kind of deal. And in order to be successful in the business of oil and gas, you have to overcome that objection, from somebody. And, the way to do that, is to find a way to connect with the people that you're trying to work with, and I think I got an answer. I'm just, yeah. So I think, another thing that I carry forward, from my work in oil and gas would be, experience working, in the local politics, permitting, and, overall, community development. When you work in oil and gas, you have to, get the majority of the stakeholders, that own the property in the area that you want to be in on board with you. So it's a little bit different than real estate in the sense that, in real estate, if I like you and you like me, we're going to work together. In oil and gas, if you don't like me and you're where I need to be, I still have to work with you and find a way to make that happen. So that kind of relates back to how you need to be, personable and able to connect with people, whether they like you or not, in order to get, to a point where you can actually succeed, with a project of that size and scope. And then beyond, sorry. I think probably at first, it was a little bit overwhelming getting into the, oil and gas sector and working on, large scale projects, with millions and millions of dollars, at stake and on the table, and it's something that, you know, you quickly get past because you're either going to make it or you're not, you know, when you're working, you know, in any job. So it's something that, you know, there's, you know, first aid jitters, you know, working on a new project or a new job, they are just that, you know, you know, they're there for a couple days maybe, and then they're gone, you know, and you're off to the races. And, you know, when I got started working in oil and gas, I had no idea what I was doing. You know, I had no experience in it, and you know, it was trial by fire. So I had to learn everything on the fly. And a lot of times, you know, the people I was dealing with in my early days, you know, knew more about it than I did, you know, which put me at a little bit of a disadvantage. But on the flip side as well, you know, it was somewhat of an advantage because the people felt like they could trust me because they knew that they knew more than me. So they weren't, you know, threatened by me. And, you know, a lot of that was being so young, you know, working with a lot of these people, you know, that it just kind of, you know, everything just started clicking. But I think as far as working on, you know, big development projects, you know, those are things that kind of come with time. And, you know, you pick up more and more responsibility as time goes on, and then, you know, you pick up a little bit of experience doing this and a little bit of experience doing that. You piece it all together, you know, and that, you know, ends up, you know, being the ultimate skill set to you know, pull all the pieces together, you know, for the puzzle. And that's more or less what you're doing when you're working in oil and gas. If you looked at oil and gas development, you know, the big bulk of how they evaluate projects, you know, visually is with mapping. And the way that, you know, the oil and gas maps are set up, you know, it's like a big checkerboard. And so, you know, everybody's trying to get little pieces on the board, or maybe like the board game Risk, you know, and everybody's trying to pick out, you know, their territory of where they want to be. But you don't have, you know, collusion, you don't have monopolies, so everybody's stepping on each other's toes, and you've got a lot of competition, different companies acquiring, you know, land and interest in each other's territories, you know, now blocking each other from being able to do projects, adding more layers to the, you know, complication for how you're going to get across the finish line and actually, you know, succeed with a project. The down to earth, you know, working with the farmer kind of deal, yeah, that was, you know, that's a lot of the stereotypes, you know, people that work in oil and gas, you know, there's always the joke about the guy running out the door, you know, with a shotgun. And I've had probably a half dozen of those types of, you know, scenarios, you know, where, you know, I, you know, was going to a place that I knew was a hostile environment, you know, and it was because of the industry I was working in. You know, if I was just working as a real estate agent, you couldn't pay me enough to go to, you know, to try to, you know, work with and deal with the people that I was dealing with in oil and gas. And you can't, you just, you know, why would you subject yourself to that? You know, if you know that somebody is potentially not only not going to welcome you with open arms, but yeah, with a different kind of arms. You know, so you kind of need to, you know, you got to be on your toes. You got to be willing to, you know, willing and able to adapt, you know, on the fly when you go into a situation like this, because, you know, most often you're getting, you know, somebody else's, you know, information brought to you that, you know, hey, they've run a few people out the back door, you know, or whatever, you know, like, you know, be aware that, you know, like when you go to make a house call or knock on this guy's door, you know, we need to know, you know, like that you're going there when, and check in with somebody afterward, you know, like those kind of hostile environments, because, you know, that just kind of goes with the
yeah, they turn you away because you're there to basically buy their land, right? Or it's, you get the mineral rights, right? Is that what it is?
Well, actually, it's the reason people want to run you away is because they don't know what you're there for, and they're assuming that you're there for, you know, the only thing they know is that you were basically there and you weren't invited. And a lot of people live remotely in, you know, these areas because they want to be left alone. Mm-hmm. And, you know, you're disrupting that for the people. So that makes for, you know, a challenge in and of itself. Somebody that does not want to be bothered, you know, they're not going to answer your phone calls. You know, they're not going to answer when you write a nice letter to them and tell them that, you know, you're going to offer them money. And the only option left, when you have to work with certain pieces of the puzzle. The puzzle has this many pieces; they have to all fit together in order to make the project. You don't have a choice, So, all that experience of working with people that that didn't want to be bothered, and figuring out ways to get over that barrier to entry is what kind of gave me that foundational experience to be able to work with, people in other, businesses, whether it's real estate or any other. And having that versatile ability, to work with people, from, the most blue collar person to, the doctor or CEO of some, Fortune something or other company, which I've had experiences, on both ends of the spectrum that way. It just gives you a well-rounded, set of skills and experience to be able to take forward and, work with other people, So, if I've experienced working with doctors in the past or attorneys or, small business owners, I know how to relate to those people, because I've worked with them already in the past and I know what makes them tick, and, I have a blue collar background, with, family that, they were both, union workers and, salt of the earth type of people. So, I always found that it was really easy to connect with, those types of folks as well. And then there's everybody in between, that, you have to find a way to, connect with them. And it's, you're not going to have the same experience, work-wise. People all do different things, to make their ends meet, but there's, commonalities, amongst all people, and that's really what, I think makes you successful in real estate or oil and gas or any other business is, finding a way to connect with somebody and relate to them, and add value to them and provide a service to them.
Sorry, don't mean to cut you off.
Sure.
Let's go, I think we have plenty for oil and gas and kind of your experience. Let's talk about your boxing.
Oh, yeah.
That'll be fun. So how did you get into boxing and when?
Boxing, I guess formally, I got into boxing in college, I was at Penn State, and I started my junior year, at Penn State. I had a couple of, my friends that were trying out for the team, and, they were mentioning how much fun they were having, in tryouts, and, we were just a competitive group of guys, and I thought, I thought if they could do it, I surely could as well, and decided, I'd try out with them, and, it was a good experience for us. I needed some kind of extracurricular activity, to do outside of, just going to class and parties, which is what people do in college. And
what do you love about the sport?
just the that it's, pure in a lot of ways. Oh, sorry. So what I love, I think, about boxing in general is, it's a sport that evens the odds. It's, man against man, woman against woman, person against person. There's, weight classes, so, the people are evenly matched. Me, I was never a big guy, so certain sports, I had a barrier to entry that, I couldn't overcome. I was never big enough to really be, a football player. Wasn't quite tall enough to be, able to dunk on the basketball hoop, or, stuff somebody's spike attempt on a volleyball court. I didn't have great, foot coordination to, be a, soccer player. And, I'm, predominantly Irish, and, Irish people have, the history and the background of, being known as the Fighting Irish. So it's something that just kind of clicks with me, on a molecular level. It's something that, has just passed forward for generations and generations, of, my people. And, I don't have really a lot of, violence in my nature. I don't raise my voice often. I just love the game. It's like playing chess, but, it's with, the stakes are a little different. When you make a mistake, you know about it immediately, and it doesn't feel good, when you're in a boxing ring. The big thing that I take away from, my experience, competing as a boxer is, gives you a different level, just a different perspective on life. You don't go around scared to be in a conflict or confrontation. You're not as afraid of people potentially threatening you with violence. Which, unfortunately does happen. Being able to handle yourself and defend yourself if you need to, adds a layer of confidence that, you wouldn't otherwise have. And so what I tell people, that are asking about, like what can, why you and what can you do for me, and I say, well, I'm the kind of guy that's gonna, shoot you straight and tell you tell you the truth, whether you want to hear it or not. And I'm not afraid to, get punched in the face for saying, speaking my mind. And, somebody that's willing to, step up to the plate and, take one on the chin for you, is surely going to have the confidence to negotiate, on your behalf in, all walks of life, So I think that that added level of confidence that the sport of boxing, kind of gives me, allows me to be more successful than, a lot of my peers. I think I think boxing relates to, work in real estate for me in a lot of ways. The competitive nature that I have, is what drives me forward and keeps me hungry and motivated to work for, the people that I'm representing, to get them the best possible deal, to make, sacrifices, on my own behalf, for their better interest, so I think boxing for me, helps me compete as a real estate agent by giving me the confidence to step into the arena and negotiate, on somebody's behalf, and not be afraid to get into any kind of conflict, that may arise, from that, deal or transaction or what have you. The ability to, navigate through problems, however large or small they may be, and, do it with confidence is important, especially when you're talking about the stakes involved, with real estate. Oftentimes it's one of, if not the largest, investment somebody ever makes, in their lifetime. And so you need somebody that's going to be a problem solver, that's going to be able to roll with the punches, figuratively or literally, and, navigate, a bad situation and get a positive outcome at the end of it. So, my father passed away last March, and he spent his entire life after high school, working as a pressman for the Pittsburgh Press, which later became the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I believe he was a representative with the Teamsters Union the entire time that he worked there. And it was a family business of sorts. My dad worked, with several of his cousins, and my dad's supervisor, his son was kind of a local legend, one of the Gradkowski boys who was, a backup Steelers quarterback for a time. And, they were all, good people, they were, hardworking, and, I think that just that environment that he came from and, worked in, translated into, a lot of the different ideologies and things that he passed on to me. The big thing that, he was adamant about was, don't bullshit, for lack of better words. Those are his words, not mine. But what he basically was meaning is, say what you mean what you say, and stick to your word. Be a man of your word, whether it's good or bad. Don't sugarcoat things, don't lie to people. Your honesty and your integrity is what makes you who you are. And, the way that, he always wanted to be and wanted to see me be is, just that. He didn't want to just see me be a people pleaser, that was going to go around and, you know, kiss everybody's ass, you know. I'm sure you're going to cut that out, but
Maybe not.
and I think that, you know, just, you know, adopting that mindset, you know, where, you know, I'm not going to, you know, lie to people in order to make a deal or earn business. You know, sometimes it has short-term, you know, repercussions, but it has, you know, it pays long-term dividends, you know, and it has throughout my whole life, you know, and I think that that was the biggest thing, you know, that my dad instilled in me, and he worked until the day he died. You know, he, you know, started working as soon as he got out of high school, maybe even before then, because, you know, labor laws were a little different. I think he might have started actually when he was 16, and you know, he was still on active, you know, payroll, you know, when he passed. So he was retirement age. He didn't do it, you know, and just kept going. And he had a great work ethic. My mom, you know, she's you know, a different breed. You know, she's I think with you know, a local union, works out of a hospital, locally, you know, Kane Hospital. Right now, it's just a, you know, COVID spot, and you know, being that, you know, people don't want to work in places like those types of places. You know, people like my mom who have the tenure and have been there a long time end up picking up the slack. You know, so my mom, you know, to this day, she's got let's see, she's got maybe 42 years in as a nurse now, and she's still working 70 to 80 hours a week, and she does not have to at all. And it's not even about money for her, you know, it's just, you know, like, that's who she is, that's what she does. She takes care of people, you know, that's what she's good at, and you know, that's her calling. So I've learned, you know, from her as an example, you know, that, you know, obviously having a good work ethic is one part of it, but you got to love what you do on top of, you know, just doing a job. And I think that for me, you know, it, just everything that's involved with the business of real estate, you know, all the things that, you know, I get to do and get hands on, just, I mean, I love all the aspects of it. And so, you know, gas had its ups and downs. It had a lot of ups, you know, but it had its downs as well. You know, you know, it gets old, you know, getting run off the family farm, you know, with the shotgun. And, you know, I have the benefit working in real estate to, you know, pick and choose who I work with, you know, which is, makes me a lot happier, because, you know, then I can ensure that everybody I work with, you know, wants to work with me. And it's a much more rewarding, you know, process when you go through dealing with anybody that work with you versus not. You know, I wouldn't trade in any of the experience from my past, you know, for the world, but I, you know, I genuinely enjoy what I do now, so it doesn't feel like work, you know, and that's a big, you know, that's been a big shift, you know, for me, you know, just putting all of my focus into real estate.
Historically describe Pittsburgh.
You know, Pittsburgh, in its, I think, heyday, you know, booming steel town, the Steel City, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the U.S. Steel Building, you know, I think at its peak, you know, Pittsburgh was, you know, almost the industrial capital of the world, you know, for developing, you know, raw material, you know, mainly steel. And, you know, we needed it here. You know, you know, however many bridges that Pittsburgh has, I know that Pittsburgh's got maybe the most in the world, I believe. And, you know, I'm not great with statistics and certain factoids, but, you know, that is why, you know, the history of the city is rooted deeply in, you know, the blue-collar worker, because it was a blue-collar town, you know. And I think that, you know, I remember growing up, you know, right at the end, you know, of the heyday, you know, as things are really coming to an end. And it was, you know, it was a painful time, you know, for the city of Pittsburgh, you know, shifting from, you know, a booming steel town to, you know, we don't know what we are now, and, you know, hundreds of thousands of people, scrambling for, new jobs, people relocating. We had, kind of a long period of stagnation, I think, within, the greater Pittsburgh area. Now, of course, I think with the end of, the industry, in the city of Pittsburgh, it, cleaned the city up. I do remember, serious pollution, in the city of Pittsburgh, smog, and, it stuck with me even as a very young child. It was bad. I heard it was even worse than what I ever remembered, because it was, at a time, and it was a different time than now. But I think that, watching Pittsburgh, growing up and watching it, sure.
I think it's getting darker.
It did get a little darker in the back. So I think that prosperous industries in the downtown Pittsburgh area, you pretty much drive through the Fort Pitt Tunnel and you see that skyline open up, which is like a famous view that everybody loves coming into the city. And you see big signs, UPMC, healthcare is #1, I think, for Pittsburgh, and that's what what the city converted into and became, is a major hub for healthcare. Following suit would be financials. You've got K&L Gates and Reed Smith and a couple of the other big national law firms with representation here locally. And you've got financials, you've got, the Citizens Bank, you've got PNC Bank and BNY Mellon, as you drive into the city. You only have one oil and gas company represented, and that's EQT, locally. And they're a local oil and gas company that has been local since its inception, and they have a pretty cool story and an arc that goes along with that. Growth and development, within the industry there. People don't realize that, oil and gas started in Pennsylvania, as an industry. Starting out, all the way back to 1856 was Colonel Drake's Well, and that was the beginning of oil and gas here in Pennsylvania. And a lot of the other sectors, I mean, obviously didn't start here, but they're booming, in this area, and people that, are looking for jobs, they're getting jobs in, healthcare predominantly, law and legal services, of course, financial, technology. We do have Google with a presence locally. They've, Amazon's flirted with every city, I think, throughout, the United States, and that's not coming to this town, and not the way that they expected it to, which is kind of unfortunate. But Pittsburgh's strong as a city; it'll survive, either way. And that would be the big things, that are booming now. We had a big booming, food and restaurant industry as well, but we all know that that's not currently the case. Things just got shut down today again. We'll probably lose 50 to 60%, of all of our restaurants, in the next couple of years, just because of going through a global pandemic. And then that'll spark new growth, in other sectors and, pave the way for other businesses. So I think, Pittsburgh, is a city that, I was born and raised in, and, it's the city that happens to be, the home of, most of, my entire family on both sides, and that's ultimately why I ended up, staying and, making my roots here in Pittsburgh. It's because, it's what I know, and beyond that, it's, who I know, and I think that, over the past few generations, a lot of families have, gotten disconnected, by just massive distances. And, we have technology to help bring people together right now, but it's not quite the same, it's not the same as, being able to drive, 5 minutes away, stop at your cousin's house and get, interaction between their kids and your kids, and things like that we're missing, I think, by and large, in our society, especially right now. And I think that for me, it's it bolsters, any experience that I have working in real estate, because it's not just, these aren't just places that I've been, they're all places that I've lived. I've lived all over Pittsburgh, I've worked all over Pittsburgh, and I have family in just about every neighborhood within the greater Pittsburgh area. And, all of that experience and background is, invaluable to me working, in real estate. And it gives me something special and unique to tap into, when I'm working with a client, and, I'm trying to relate to them and their specific situation. And, I can do it from a place of, of knowledge, with real knowledge, not just, Googling an address and doing a quick street view to get an idea of whether or not, half the neighborhood burned down or not. I know which neighborhoods are, better or worse, and, which ones are on, the incline and which ones are declining, and why. And I know all of that because I know people in all of these areas. And so I think that, all that ends up being invaluable, when you're working with somebody, and you want to know that the person you're working with knows what they're doing, and knows about the area that you want to be in, and what better way to do that than to, have physically either lived there, been there, or know somebody that's there. So, the real reason that I work in real estate, besides obviously, the ability to pay my bills, which everybody, they need to do those things. The reason I like working in real estate is, it's the people. I love working with people. I love taking my unique background and applying it to their situation in order to figure out, how to solve their problems, some of which, they've never encountered before. Others, they've encountered, but they maybe have only seen it from one lens, and I come with a different perspective, and I say, hey, there's 3 different ways we can get through this and solve this problem for you, and get you into a better position or a better place. And I think that the foundation of society in general is is family, and I think that having your family's shelter, being the right shelter, the right property, the right house, that's going to work for that family, and not, just be like the movie Money Pit, where you move in and like everything falls apart. There's, I like working with different types of clients for different reasons. I think that working with a first-time home buyer, that's very rewarding. They're usually tickled pink. They're super happy. When you get to that closing, they're buying their first house. Is the biggest thing they've ever done at that point, typically. And finding the perfect family, the perfect home is extremely rewarding. Working with the established family that's looking to trade up, from their starter home and into their forever home, that's also rewarding, and that's a different kind of rewarding because, they're established, they have a little bit of background and experience working, with buying a home, so they at least know the process a little bit. So it's a little bit different of a process working with those people. You don't have to do as much education. It's more digging deeper to figure out, what makes this family tick, and what their goals are. Some people think, oh, we're going to move and we're just going to get a bigger house, and they don't think, about all the things that are affected when you change, school districts or change your commute to and from work, and being able to remind people, hey, you got to take into consideration, where your kids are, where their friends are, where their extracurriculars are, reminding people that, location is number one, with real estate versus, the physical property or house. You can fall in love with the best house in the world, but if it is nowhere near, where you live and interact with people on a regular basis, is that really going to work for you? If you spend 10 hours plus a week, just traveling places, you're on the road, you're on the road all that time, and that's time that you should be spending at home with your family or, enjoying a sporting event, and just yeah, just living your own life instead of driving all the time. And that's something I learned the hard way. I went and I moved out of Pittsburgh to get closer to a job that I was working, and it made sense. I was trying to get an hour-long commute, and shorten that. And the problem is I didn't do quite enough homework, and I got 45 minutes away from my family, my friends, my social life, and I was still 45 minutes from work instead of an hour. So I gave up all the things that matter outside of work, and barely got any benefit of a shorter commute to work in exchange. And that was something that like stayed deep-seated in my memory, that moving forward, like I'm going to make that same mistake twice, and I'm going to make sure that everybody that I work with never makes that mistake, because not everybody has the ability to just pack up and move and sell their own house as a real estate agent like I did. And there's a major cost associated with moving, and people don't want to just get up and move every year or two. So you want to make sure that you remind people that real estate is a location game. It's all about the location. It's not about the white picket fence and the perfect looking house. It's location, and that's something that is easily overlooked, because people want things to look a certain way, but if they don't feel a certain way, if they don't fit into your life, you're not doing yourself any favors. You're doing yourself a disservice. And while it's great to sell real estate, it's great to sell a house, I don't want to sell somebody the wrong house and have that weigh on my conscience, and that family, their life gets flipped upside down because they can't function because they moved to the wrong area, or the wrong side of town for what they're doing, and families fall apart, over stuff like that. To me, that's high stakes stuff. You don't want your family to fall apart, just because you didn't advise them properly, and you put them in a house to make a quick buck instead of really digging deep to figure out what makes this family tick and what's really important to them. So my work is almost exclusively on the weekend. I'm working Friday through Sunday. People that work typical normal jobs, they're 9 to 5 Monday to Friday, and their weekends are open. So I have to be available on weekends because the general working people, which most people, they need to have a job or a large sum of cash in order to buy a house. They need a job in order to buy a home typically, so you have to make time for your people when they're available, and that's on weekends. So
Okay.
Predominantly I work nights and weekends.
Let's say,
I mean, I think, availability is everything when it comes to, not availability, but accessibility, I would rather say, than availability. I'm not always available, but, if you can get access to me, and if it's something, urgent, I'm going to make availability for myself. I'm going to stop what I'm doing if there's an emergency situation, and that I can't say that I'm available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because I sleep, but if I'm awake and, I'm in front of a computer, or I have a phone on me that has battery life in it, I'm going to be able to be accessed, by either, email, text, or phone call, pretty much 7 days a week. And, being available to help people 7 days a week, it wears on you in some ways because of the, there's no days off, in that situation. But in being passionate about, the business and what I'm doing, that's not an issue for me. It's not like, oh, I have to do this or I have to do that. It's like, oh, like, hey, this guy just called me, he needs me to do A, B, C, D. I like him. I'm going to go the extra mile for him because I like who I'm working with, which is also important. You need to be able to have that connection with the people. And not only when you're there with them, but you need to be accessible, when you're not with somebody. And I think that that's paramount, to working in this business, because, people have, things change, they have questions, concerns, and, this is high stakes and it's high stress for the people that you're working with. And in order to make everything run as smoothly as possible, being accessible and available to answer questions, right away, alleviates a lot of that stress and allows things to run a lot more smooth. And, you get somebody that's, working part-time, or they're, on their way to retirement, or they're brand new and they're not very good with, organization and being accessible. It, creates problems that don't need to be created and adds stress to the situation and makes it harder. And it also jeopardizes your ability to even get to the closing table. So, accessibility, availability, communication, they're all key. You're, in essence, what you do has to be in the best interest of the people you represent. And so that's basically being a fiduciary by definition. And when you sign up to be a real estate agent, you become a fiduciary to your clients. And we have this real simple form, that every person sees and signs for every real estate transaction. It's called a consumer notice, and it basically gives you a very, very layperson's brief definition of all the roles that a real estate agent can play. And ultimately, all of those roles, in essence, are acting as a fiduciary. I have to put your needs in front of my own in order to be a good real estate agent and an ethical real estate agent and a lawful real estate agent. And in doing that, I need to, forget about making a paycheck and just work through the whatever the situation may be. Sometimes you get into working on something with somebody, and they need to get out of the deal. This deal's falling apart, they need out of it. And you can either work with them and help them get out of a bad deal, or you could try to tell them no, they can't get out of it, and force them to follow through with something that ends up being a bad decision for them. It just, it ended up not being a good fit for one reason or another. And regardless of why somebody wants to walk from a deal, that matters. But, if their heart's set, dead set against it, you can't try to force somebody into something. And it just happened to me less than a month ago. This guy called me up and he said, "Is there any way out of this deal?" And I could have easily just said no, And the truth is that there's always a way out, And in this guy's situation, he put himself in a situation where he had to, give up his earnest money, his hand money, is $1,000, that he lost. It wasn't a ton of money, but I could have easily lied to the guy and just made a quick commission, and he would have closed that deal, and then found out probably after the fact that there was a way out of that. And, forever after, my reputation's tarnished over, a couple $1,000 in my back pocket. So that's a real long version of, why is it important to be a fiduciary to somebody, and, what does that mean? That is in essence what a real estate agent is. You're acting as an agent, for the better interest of the person you're representing, and that's it, And if you keep that in the forefront of your mind, that's my goal, nothing goes wrong. You don't have issues, with compromised ethics and lying and cheating and, deals falling apart or going sideways. And, that becomes even more complicated, when you work in the role of dual agent, when you're representing both parties, and, you know more than you should, as a listing agent, more than a buyer should know. And so, you're trying to bring these two parties together, and you have to basically act like a neutral party, like Switzerland. You can't play favorites, when you act in that capacity, and that's very difficult for a lot of people because you have obviously rapport in a relationship you know, with the people that you've represented on the listing side when you're, you know, working as their agent to sell something. And now you're representing a buyer and you're bringing that buyer to your, you know, seller. And you might, and you know way more than any other agent, you know, representing a buyer. So there's an advantage for that buyer, you know, that you know more about, you know, the property that's being sold. And you know more about the numbers than, you know, you can tell the buyer. So it's tricky because you want to act as a fiduciary for your buyer, but you have to act as a fiduciary for your seller. And so what that ends up meaning is you got to be very forthcoming with, you know, that representation, you know, on both sides, and say, hey, you know, this party wants me to represent them, and you know, here's what they're offering, and they're asking me, you know, for advice on that, you know. But and you can give people, you know, good and honest advice. You know, you just have to cut the line, you know, once it begins, you know, to be a conflict of interest, you know, when you're representing another party over here. So that's probably the most challenging role, I think, you know, to work in, you know, as a real estate agent. But yeah, you make more money, and as long as you keep that, you know, that understanding that, you know, you're, you know, a fiduciary to both these parties, and you basically keep certain pieces of information confidential that, you know, you have to, then everything works out, you know. And otherwise, you know, it can be very easy to be compromised in those roles. You know, you can easily, you know, like you said, you know, you're making more money, and you know more about, you know, what somebody's motivation is on one side or the other. You might know that, you know, the person buying this property, you know, that you bring to your seller, you know, like they'll overpay for it. They'll keep, you know, and they'll pay anything for it, you know. But you can't just tell them, hey, they're going to pay whatever you want, you know, hold firm, because then you've compromised them. And then on the flip side, you know, you can't tell the buyer, yeah, I know they're going to take, you know, X amount of dollars, so let's offer them this. You know, you can't do those things, you know. But it's very, very easy to want to do that, because that would make your job a lot easier, and you're going to make more money potentially. But you can't. But that's a very short-term, short-sighted game that you're playing, and it's very dangerous, and you're compromising your ethics, and eventually it's going to catch up with you, and that's going to, you know, lead to a much shorter career.